Do you want an amazing marriage? Are you ready to take your marriage to the next level? Then stick around for Your Marriage Matters podcast with marriage coach Lynn. Let's put some fun and sizzle into your relationship.
Many people will say that communication is the key to a great marriage. Communication is a vast word that covers a lot of territory. Listening is an important part of communication. Today, we will focus on the important skill of listening. Are you a good listener? How do you know? Find out what it takes to be a good listener and how to go about listening for meaning. If you aren't a good listener, chances are you are not in tune with your spouse. Listening is essential to good relationships, yet most of us could improve our listening skills. We want to listen for 3 reasons. Listen to understand, listen to empathize, and listen to problem solve. Do you often interrupt your spouse or think about what you're going to say before he or she has finished? Let's talk about some suggestions and techniques for becoming a better listener. Please visit my website, Marriage Coach Lynn, for tips on listening, communicating, and dealing with arguments. We have only enough time to talk in generalities here and give a few pointers. I've said this before and it's worth repeating. You can't go wrong if you focus on your marriage as a team. What do team players do? They work together. They approach life as a give and take. They each have a role. They listen, exchange ideas, and make adjustments. Remember one podcast episode where I talked about adapt, adjust, and grow? If we listen, we are able to adapt and adjust to our partner. An important factor in listening is humility and setting the ego aside. Set aside your desire to be right. If you are right, you often lose. No one wants to be dominated, criticized, or be at the other end of, "See, I told you so." Therefore, we need kindness. It is kind to listen. If we can approach people with a belief that what they are going to say is important to them and matters to them and demonstrate kindness, that will go a long way. On the heels of kindness is patience. Patience means you care and have all the time in the world to let your partner compose his or her thoughts and to then consider them. Have you ever been in a workplace situation where you know your boss wasn't really interested in what you had to say? Where your boss had his mind made up? It doesn't feel respectful or good, does it? Let's not treat our beloved partner that way. Good listeners are present in the moment. Don't bring up the past or have your mind darting ahead to the future, thinking that what your partner has to say couldn't possibly work. Being present in the moment actually simplifies matters. Give it a try. When you are present, you aren't hurried. I know. Some of you have 7 things to do today and 5 places to be within a few hours. But if you're going to rush through life on most days with little time to listen, what kind of communication dynamics are you establishing? Being in the present moment means that you aren't concerned with what you are going to say or what you want to say. This can be difficult. This might take effort and practice. If you find your mind going blank a lot, that's a good thing. Chances are you are focused on your partner and you were listening to the point you forgot what thoughts might have entered your mind while your partner was speaking. Don't be afraid of the silence. We are taught to avoid and fear silence because someone might jump in and steal your chance to speak. This is especially nerve-wracking for the more quiet, subdued person in a small group setting. The object of communication is not to keep things moving along, but to have a respectful give and take. Let's talk about making the environment ready for listening. We have to enter the listening experience calm and receptive. Be ready for anything, especially an introspection as to what we can do to change ourselves. The valve has to be open for listening. Humility, as I mentioned, is important. Set the ego aside and come to an exchange with an open heart and mind, free from an agenda or self-gain or self-image. The communication experience is not full and complete if one partner is defensive, is preoccupied with other thoughts or stresses, or has anger, feels attacked, or if there's a wall of resentment. Other deterrents to listening include being closed-minded, an unwillingness to listen to an opposing viewpoint. I want to cite an example from a movie that came out 10 years ago called Up in the Air. I'm not endorsing this movie, but it has a good scene that shows a man going silent and a woman who makes assumptions and has misunderstandings. It shows how strong personalities sometimes don't listen, how people can fill in the silence with their own interpretations, and how selfishness can pretty much ruin the listening process. The movie Up in the Air stars George Clooney and Vera Farmiga. They are jet-setting professionals who have a hookup relationship in various cities during the course of a year. He's a 40-year-old playboy who seemed to meet his match. In one scene, they exchange home addresses. He starts falling in love with his hookup woman, and she senses that he has fallen a little more deeply for her than she would like. This is not what she wants. She's happy to keep the relationship at a distance and as a selfish business trip rendezvous in various cities around the country. When he asks for her business card with home address on it, she gives it to him and says, "You're not going to change on me, are you?" One day he finds himself in Chicago and decides to go to her house. He shows up at her home unannounced. She opens the door and is shocked and not pleased, and he leaves her home upset. She calls within an hour and says, "What were you thinking showing up at my door like that?" He says, "I wanted to see you. I didn't know you had a family. Why wouldn't you tell me that?" She says, "Look, I'm sorry I ruined your evening, but you could have seriously screwed things up for me. That's my family. That's my real life." He says, "I thought I was a part of your real life." She says, "I thought we signed up for the same thing." He says, "Try and help me to understand exactly what it is that you signed up for." She says, "I thought our relationship was perfectly clear. I mean, you are an escape. You're a break from our normal lives. You're a parenthesis. What do you want?" What does he then do? Silence. She says, "Tell me what you want." Again, silence. She says, "See, you don't even know what you want. I'm a grown-up. If you would like to see me again, then give me a call, okay?" At which point she hangs up. She's the woman in power, treating him like a child. The woman thinks she's listening, but she is not listening for understanding, and instead assumes wrongly about his feelings, mainly because the man is not articulating in a way she wants or is familiar with. She makes her conclusions, takes the powerful position, and hangs up the phone with the typical communication disconnect you see in movies and that is sometimes experienced in real life. So just think about this dialogue, the exchange that took place. She was expecting him to communicate in a way that's familiar to her. How many times did this happen in your relationship and among married couples? I think it's very common that we are used to having our mate respond to us in a way that's familiar to us. This is yet another reason why I talk about love languages and why you need to know your partner's love language, your partner's way of communicating, your partner's temperament. I want to ask you, if you make assumptions in your dialogue with your spouse, are you looking for what is familiar to you? Men and women can sometimes be on a different page. Take the time to listen, be in the present moment, and have kindness and respect. Take it slow if you have to, and don't proceed until you reach understanding. Next week, we'll talk about conflict and arguments. Until then, make your marriage